President Trump, no surprise, taking this to the Supreme Court. Is this something you expect them to take up? And what would you expect them to think of something like this? Because it seems kind of cut and dry.
Yeah, I mean, Eugene, let's start with your first question. Is this something that I expect the court to take up? Possibly, not necessarily, but very well possibly, in part because this is a court that oftentimes will take up the president's quote unquote emergency request for its intervention. And here, what he's asking for, what he will be asking for, is a stay of an injunction by a lower court that prohibits them from doing any further above ground construction while this litigation continues. And so in order to be able to resume the construction, at least above ground, this president needs that permission of this Supreme Court. And knowing that, they may be hard-pressed to turn down an opportunity to clarify what they mean. On the other hand, will this necessarily go his way? I don't think so. And that's because the president took it upon himself unilaterally, as you were just reviewing, to not only demolish the East Room, but to begin the construction of a ballroom. And this court says in a 100-page opinion that for a variety of reasons across statutory and constitutional authorities, that just wasn't his decision to make. Irrespective of what dollars he's using, irrespective of the rationale for building it, it was never his decision to make. This is sort of a fundamental clash of the branches of government, and this is a Supreme Court that has been very friendly to this president's interpretation of sort of an elastic presidential power. The question is, at some point that rubber band snaps. This might be that opportunity, Eugene.
Lisa, really quickly, the East Room is gone. Like the whole side of the White House is gone. So even if the Supreme Court comes out and says that the president can't do this, then what? Because there doesn't seem to be a way to bring it all back.
No, there doesn't. And more importantly, it doesn't necessarily mean that the White House has to put any money toward or that there's any relief for the people who have brought this case in the first place. Now, let's remember, the plaintiffs in this case are a national historic organization that basically are seeking to vindicate the interest that all of us have in the preservation of the historic buildings. So it's not clear what the relief for them would be other than pausing and stopping any future construction. But you're right, there is a very obvious hole in the ground in Washington, D.C. with cranes that are paused mid-air, visible from all corners of town. If the president is not allowed to go forward, there's going to be a big question of, well, what do we do about that huge construction site in the middle of the White House grounds?
Yeah. Let's move over to another legal case that the president and his team are losing. This is the David Hearn case. We have all covered this, so viewers, know exactly what I'm talking about. The president still blaming vandals, even though David Hearn has been clear that he didn't do anything, and so has Judge Jeanine Pirro. And one of the things, Susan, that has stuck with me over this entire time is no matter what President Trump says, no matter what the Interior Secretary says in front of the camera, when they go into court, there are things they have to do, which is tell the truth. And David Hearn was on CNN, and he said this to Caitlin Collins. Listen to this, and let's talk on the other side.
This could happen to anybody. If it can happen to me, it could happen to anybody. Nobody's immune to this kind of government lawlessness, essentially. It's really the kind of thing that you think country ruled by a dictator. That's where you see that kind of thing. And this is not the land of the free and the home of the brave that I know.
Is this a country that you know as well, or is it another one, maybe not the United States, Susan?
Look, imagine being out on your bike on a summer afternoon and stopping by the National Mall, looking at, what Donald Trump has already sort of wrought, the disruption. The cranes are all over the city, the digging, the visible signs of a man who is determined to put his personal stamp, writing it, physically across our Capitol. And then all of a sudden you're being charged with a felony because not just the president, but so many of those around him believe that his lies are more important than, the actual actual truth. It's a painful moment in the country, and I think that's why these stories are resonating for so many people. Eugene, I mean, it all feels like a profound challenge to what we think of as the United States, and of course, to do so while polluting the actual National Mall that's here to commemorate and memorialize and pay tribute to those very values that are being, profaned. I mean, it's just, tragedy or bad farce. And I think that's the through line here in these court opinions again and again over the last 2 years. Today's is no exception in that sense. Courts are screaming out to us and saying these are profoundly un-American decisions. And we have, unfortunately, ample evidence that for everyone who says, okay, this is too far for me to go, apparently including even Jeanine Pirro, the former Fox TV host who's the U.S. attorney here in D.C., there are those who are willing to follow. And that includes Trump's acting attorney general, who now seems on the brink of confirmation. His personal lawyer turned into the attorney general, who can bring more cases like this, I'm afraid.
Yeah. Mr. Chairman, I'm going to take a page out of your book and ask you to put a little bow on this for us, because both of these cases are similar in that there are a lot of resources, a lot of time, a lot of money in this federal government that goes to making us all live in Donald Trump's realities.
Well, that last part is it. He is forcing us to live in his reality. As a native Washingtonian, to see what this man has done to this city is an abomination. It is abhorrent. Even during the worst days of the riots and the protests, where people were, spraying, painting here and there, you didn't see anything like that. That touched on the monuments, if you will, of the nation. You may have, a business or shop owner may have to deal with vandals, etc. But there was even amongst those who were angry at the administration, angry at the country, if you will, for the war in Vietnam or the lack of civil rights or the dehumanization of women and subjugation of their rights. They didn't take it out on the national monuments. And that's what Donald Trump is doing. His imprimatur is, I'm going to turn this into me, and there's nothing you can do about it. And to the last point, before moving on to this one, about this reflecting pool, the situation with the East Wing, what's the court going to do? The court's going to give him what he wants. They'll find a way. They'll make the case that was made here. Well, you've already torn the building down, and you're not going to rebuild the old East Wing, and the administration doesn't have those parameters to do that. So future administrations should know they can't. But what are you going to do? So that's how Donald Trump acts. He acts, and then everybody else has to figure out how to undo it, and they realize they can't. He wins. And somehow, somewhere along the way, we as a nation have got to put a stop to this, because the Congress won't. This Congress will not, which is what the elections are ultimately going to be about. Whether or not there is the American people putting a check back into the balance of things by redesigning, if you will, what the Congress looks like, since Trump wants to redesign everything else.
Everyone's home improvement edition here in Washington, D.C. Different journeys, though. Susan, when you're thinking about the politics here, you have Americans all over the country. We've had Alex Tabbitt, one of our colleagues, many of the reporters going around talking to voters, people who voted for Donald Trump 3 times, crying to him and saying that they can't afford to breathe, as one woman put it. You have this war with Iran, where we are spending billions of dollars all the time in a war that the American people don't want, don't understand, and the president hasn't really spent any time doing that for them. And yet the president is walking around taking glue sticks and gluing gold appliques in the Oval Office, spending all this brain space. Maggie Haberman says 70%, she estimates, of the president's brain space is to these renovations. When you have a president so completely out of touch with and completely doesn't even seem bothered by the things that are happening to the American people while he is getting what he wants, where does that leave us?
I'm glad you brought that up, Eugene. I think that image of Trump with the glue gun and the gold encrusted wood, putting that up in the Oval Office, is probably the enduring symbol that I took out of the excellent book that Maggie and Jonathan Swan wrote, because it shows a president who is essentially not only indifferent to what voters think, but basically it's the profaning of the Capitol and the Executive Mansion are the physical architectural manifestations of our Congress. They're these beautiful, sort of spare, elegant, restrained, neoclassical designs meant to show in physical form what our Constitution is, which is, again, very streamlined, simple, balanced, right? You have proportions. You have power here vested in an executive, but also then checked in a legislative branch. And, you encrust it with gold, and all of a sudden you've broken something more than just how the building looks and how tacky it is. And so for me, Donald Trump is all about, sort of like, forget the metaphor. He's the metaphor made real. But in the election year, does any of it matter? My view is that it's breaking through in a way that we haven't seen. That's part of the reason, obviously, for Trump's plunge in his approval ratings is people are worried about things like the price of gas, but also I think it's pretty easy to make a connection between a president whose priorities are himself, the personal enrichment, and the engoldification of his physical surroundings at the expense of what Americans care about. And you see it in those numbers. It's not, Democrats already were sour on Donald Trump. The reason he's going down in the polls is because of independents, Republicans